Well, the third chapter is IP,
Okay.
intellectual property, because I've found when I'm teaching my students and when I'm talking with even business people, but certainly when I'm talking with normal people in Canada, the United States, Western Europe, that they don't understand what intellectual property is. And there is this belief, and obviously it has two elements to it, but there's the belief that China got where it's got today by stealing IP. And so I think it's important to understand what intellectual property is and the extent to which China is part of the global intellectual property environment.
Okay. So, would you mind clarifying where they've gotten IP wrong? I'm sure you detail it thoroughly in the book, but just in summation, like what is sort of the major misnomers around IP?
Okay, so IP in terms of that which is protected by law is copyright, patents, and trademarks. Okay? And the copyright, patents, and trademark law of China today is basically following the model of the WTO TRIPS, the trade-related aspects of intellectual property. So the Chinese system on the books is basically a Western knockoff. Now, China wasn't always, didn't always have the same view of intellectual property that the West did. And the West didn't always have the same view of intellectual property as the West does now. So the global system under WTO, under the World Trade Organization, TRIPS, is a modern concept in which China is an active participant. It's a modern evolving concept. So one can ask, for example, with respect to copyright, should we have copyright? In the West, in China today, the answer is absolutely yes. Traditionally, did China have copyright? No. First copyright law introduced, 1910, the last year of the Qing dynasty. So although China was the country that invented printing and that invented paper and that definitely had more books than anybody else before the Gutenbergs reinvented the printing press in the West, certainly China was more literate from an idea of copyright. It didn't have copyright, right? Anybody could copy anything. So you look at modern day digital age, the digital age right now. Where is the most copy being produced? Well, obviously it's being produced digitally. What's among the most important aspects of creation? The expression of ideas, coding, right? Memes on the web, a tremendous amount of blogs and photographs. Those are all naturally protected by copyright under sort of WTO ideas. Is that being honored in China? Well, is it being honored in the West? My view is that maybe in 50 years we won't have copyright in the form that we know it today. Think about the way that AI can produce passable music or passable text. Is that protected by copyright? Well, I think that is a question that's in law. People haven't quite worked out where copyright is going. When I go up to the web and I copy vast amounts of information, some of that is protected. Some of that is, Creative Commons. Some of that is protected by fair use, so I can use it, but I can't make money at it. So copyright itself is an evolving concept. Do the Chinese rip off an awful lot of copyrighted materials? Copyrighted is, you don't have to actually register it with any place. It's a natural right under current laws that are common throughout the world. By common throughout the world, I mean they're implemented separately in different jurisdictions of the world with some variation, okay? So it's a natural right. So if I type something and it's original an original expression of an idea, I own the copyright to that. And if I'm in China, that is protected for my lifespan plus 50 years, right? And if anybody copies that, then I can go after them. But of course I don't go after them, right? Unless there's money to be made from that and they have deep pockets. So if I can gain by suing them to get the money that they've made from it. And that actually is a minority of the copy that's produced. Okay? So I've gone on a tangent here. But my idea was that copy, that the creative expression, which is a natural right under our current view of copyright, is changing with the evolution of the digital age. But it takes real resources to make knowledge. And if once I make that discovery, and the moment that I make that discovery, then anybody else can use it, then I will never get rewarded properly for the sunk costs, for the expenses that I have incurred, for the R&D. And that means that economically speaking, there will be an underproduction of new knowledge. So that's what patents were set up to counter. And the Americans wrote that into the second clause of the US Constitution. So this was very important to the American revolutionaries in the late 18th century. They saw innovation as being absolutely critical to the strength of a society. In the same revolutionary tradition, the Communist Party of China sees innovation to be absolutely critical to the development of a society. And so the Chinese now have very much bought into the Western patenting system. And as I said, Huawei is the largest filer of PCTs in the world. And they're stimulating innovation, and they're stimulating the registration of that innovation with a legal form that protects the holder of the originator of that knowledge, as long as the originator of the knowledge has registered that IP. So Chinese have bought into that, but I think that there may be something fraught in the current system of IP with respect to patents. I don't know what the alternative is, but the current system, and if you talk with the chief technology officer at Google, she'll tell you that the current system is broken. You talk with the people at Huawei, and they'll probably say, well, it's not the best system, but it's the system we have. The business person looks at an American company, for example, and says, how do they do that?
Right.
Oh, that's how they do that.
Right.
And then it flips it to China.
Right.
And if it involves patented processes, and those patents are in the United States, and they're not in China, then that flip is totally legal under WTO and under the laws of China, under the laws of the United States. The third one that I didn't mention, of course, is trademarks.
Right.
Okay, now China's copying of trademarks and the great trademark gold rush in China is absolutely phenomenal. So it's interesting because trademarks are part of the old Chinese tradition. So China's always had trademarks, but you have more flagrant breaking of intellectual property on trademarks that is egregious than you do on patents and copyright.
Okay.
So you think of the knockoff Louis Vuitton bags. You know, you think of the running shoes, right? Nike running shoes.
Right.
Those are, if they're being sold in a jurisdiction where the infringed party or the copied party has registered its trademark, those are breaches of intellectual property on trademarks.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Does China do it more than anybody else? Probably.
Right. So it's not. This isn't.
So does it do it to Chinese stuff as well as Western stuff? Sure.
Yeah.
you've had Mao Tai, right?
Right.
Okay, have you had Mao Pai Mao Tai?
No.
You might have if you've been to a Chinese restaurant.
Okay.
So the joke is that there is more fake Mao Tai in Chinese restaurants in China than there is real Mao Tai.
Okay.
Okay? So copying is something that a lot of companies do, and it's a great embarrassment to the people in Beijing, and it's something that makes people in other parts of the world, especially those who own those brands and those who have registered their brands in China, really, really upset. And yes, it exists.
So it's not misunderstanding, because like we started the understanding of IP in.
You've got to look at which IP you're talking about.
Right.
Okay.
So when it comes
so
to
I say there is copying of copyright. Right.
Right.
All of those textbooks
Right.
that I used, that the Chinese used in China,
Yeah.
right? Many of them, not all of them, but many of them from my day when I was a younger person, that were translated from the West, were never translated by giving royalties and sold in China by giving royalties to the original owner of that copyright in Europe or in Canada or the United States. Right? So there was an awful lot of copyright theft there, going back to when I was studying, and it still continues. And there's knockoffs on selling of music
Yeah.
and film,
Yeah.
right, on CDs.
Yeah.
I'm not sure when the last time was that you downloaded the film,
Right.
but you were breaking copyright there.
Yeah.
That goes on to a great degree in China,
Right.
and it goes on with respect to their own original expressions of ideas, as well as to foreign expressions of ideas, which don't have to be registered in China, because copyright is a natural right under current understanding that occurs all over the world.
So
So that exists. Are patents infringed? Yes, patents are infringed.
Right.
Are patents infringed elsewhere in the world? Yes, patents are infringed elsewhere in the world. Is it worse in China than in the rest of the world? I don't know. I suspect it's about the same. You've heard about Samsung,
Yeah.
7-year battle with Apple over
Yeah.
copyrights on their phone?
Yeah.
It was settled out of court.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it was settled out of court. What does that mean from a point of view of an economist who's trying to do accounting of that? It means they don't know. They don't know what it really meant. Okay? And most patent infringements are settled out of court. That means that it's very difficult to know the extent to which things have been breached, and then it's very difficult to know whether China's worse than the rest of the world.
Right.
But I think with trademarks, you can point the finger.
You can point the finger, right, and that's generally understood and accepted. So there's no miscommunication.
No. That's generally understood and accepted.
Yeah.
You have to be a little bit careful about whom you're talking.
Let's say the day-to-day consumer that buys the fake Nike, like they were like, yeah, made in China, knockoff.
Let's say the day-to-day consumer. Which consumer? Is it top-of-the-line consumer, rich consumers? Is it middle-class people? Is it people that are working in factories?
Well, let's
let's go the top.
Middle class to upper class, like
Upper class, there will be, and you know this, a snobbishness about owning the real thing.
Sure.
And for the ones below that upper class, there is often a wish to sort of hide the fact that you might have bought the not real thing. And for the bottom, who cares, because everybody knows. And from the people that are running the country, the Communist Party, there's general embarrassment for it.